Let's move into the 4 types of arguments. First of all, there's a deductive. And a deductive argument moves from the general to the specific. For example, a principle that most people would believe in would be freedom of speech. So you would start with that as your basic principle, general principle, and filter down to your specific conclusion. Let's take the idea of the service learning program. Maybe the general principle is the United States values people helping other people. So you can move from that general principle down to your conclusion of, therefore, we should institute the service learning requirement for students. Now, you want to be careful if you do this, that you don't take for granted that the audience is going to have that same general principle in mind. There again, your audience analysis should let you know if that's true, but don't take it for granted. Also, don't say, well, we all believe, if you're not sure that your audience would agree with that. A second type of argument is inductive. And this is reasoning that begins with specific pieces of evidence and then builds to a general conclusion. You base your conclusion then on conditions that actually exist, pieces of evidence that you can observe, concrete examples or experiences. So you accumulate that evidence and it leads to the conclusion. You want to be sure to examine and provide enough evidence, and you also want to examine representative recent evidence and also consider exceptions. Those are the first 2 types, deductive and inductive. Let's take that issue of service learning and quickly show how that might work. You start with the deductive reasoning of the service learning. In general, the United States values that people help other people. You move down. You take to your conclusion. You take for the inductive, what do you think you would do? Well, you could go out and get lots of different kinds of evidence. Students' GPAs seem to improve when they're involved. Members of the community feel more connected to the university because their students are coming out to help, and so forth and so on, so that you accumulate that and you still come to that same conclusion. So you see how you can start with one conclusion or proposition and use either the inductive or the deductive. A third type of argument is analogy. And with analogy, you compare like items. And you really are saying, since these are so alike in other ways, one can reasonably conclude that they're probably alike in the way that you believe. Now, the 2 cases need to be sufficiently alike for you to make your case. For instance, you might say that service learning programs in a similar college have been effective, and therefore it can work in your university. Analogies also can be figurative. The one that I just offered was a literal analogy. So in terms of them being figurative, you might do something like service learning is like a basketball game. The fourth and final type of argument is causal. And this has to do with cause and effect. One thing leads to another. For example, working in service learning programs causes students to get better grades. Be careful though, because there may have been some other causes for the students' grades to increase. Those then are 4 types of arguments. Let's see how we pull all of this together. First of all, you need to state your proposition. What is the primary point? In this case, we've been working with the idea that the university should require students to take 9 hours of service learning before they graduate. Then you want to apply your evidence. And remember, you can have all different kinds of evidence. Students' GPAs, community feeling better about the university, employers saying that students who have worked in service learning tend to make better employees, and so forth. From those, you will draw your logical conclusion. Now, it doesn't necessarily work that nice and neat. Don't you wish that it did? So you've got to weave your proof throughout, and you've got to make your evidence coherent and compelling. As you build your argument, strive for internal consistency to present your evidence. Try to imagine how an opposing audience member might dialogue with you at each step. Also try to offer novel evidence, something that audience members may not have known. Well now, we've talked about 4 types of proofs and 4 types of arguments. If argument is your destination, the evidence is your cargo, and the proof is the vehicle that enables the evidence to arrive at your destination.